Hi everyone, it's Nicole, and today I'm bringing you my January and February wrap up. So I've read 57 books. I'm planning on reading 58 since technically today, as I'm filming, it's February 29th, and I'm planning on reading at least one more book. So I'm planning on reading 58, but as of this moment in filming, I've read 57 books for January and February. I know that's a lot of books. I'm only going to talk about the ones that kind of really stuck with me. They could be either really great books or they could be really terrible books. So I'm just going to kind of go through this. I've made my notes. I have Goodreads in front of me, so I have all my information and all my thoughts that I want to talk to you guys about. So of course we're going to start with January. And just for the sake of filming, I've read multiple books in the series, so I'm just going to lump those series together. And also this is in no particular order. If you want to look at the books I've read in order, I do have a thread on Twitter. So the first book that I read of the year was Real Murders by Charlene Harris. This is the first book in the Aurora Teagarden mystery series, and I also read the second book, A Bone to Pick. These are cozy mysteries, and in this series we follow Aurora or Ro Teagarden. She is a librarian in a small town in Georgia, in a Atlanta suburb. She's a part of a crime buffs club called Real Murders. They just love like serial killers and trying to figure out and learn all about that. And she loves Jack the Ripper, and I love Jack the Ripper, so that really stuck with me. Of course, in any cozy mystery, you follow Aurora as she tries to figure out who done it, and they're just really cute reads. I gave these both 4 stars. The next few books that I'm going to talk about are from the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series by Laurel K. Hamilton. And I only have the first book, but I read that last year. So I continued on and read books 2 through 6. The Laughing Corpse is number 2. Number 3 is Circus of the Damned. Number 4 is The Lunatic Cafe. Number 5 is Bloody Bones. And number 6 is The Killing Dance. So these books, you follow Anita Blake. She is a vampire hunter and necromancer. It's an urban fantasy where vampires, shifters, all that jazz are part of the real world. Everybody knows about them. There are certain laws that protect vampires and the dead. So it basically like they have rights too. So in this world, you could hire Anita, she's a necromancer, to raise the dead to either a couple of things, like they were trying to contest a will of someone. And some people just, think it's really interesting to raise the dead, especially around Halloween. So you can pay Anita. She works for, this kind of necromancy service to raise the dead. She works with the police as kind of like a liaison when there are supernatural murders. And so you're basically following her. Each book has a different murder that they're trying to figure out. These books are really dated. They don't stand the test of time very well. The men in this book are kind of too alpha. Too alpha meaning they believe like women have a certain place kind of thing. And it just really comes off kind of the wrong way when reading these books. I gave Guilty Pleasures 3 stars. I gave The Laughing Corpse 4 stars. And then books 3 through 6, I think I gave them like 2.5 or 3 stars. So, I mean, Anita is a really great character. She like kicks ass and takes names, but some of her decisions I don't really agree with, especially when dealing with her romantic relationships. The head vampire of the town is really into her, and so is this werewolf shapeshifter, and they kind of butt heads a lot. And when dealing with that particular drama of the book, it just doesn't read very well. But I'm really interested in this series to see where it goes, except for the last book, because again, Anita makes a decision that I don't really agree with. I don't want to spoil it for you, so if you don't want to know about the 6th book, just kind of like fast forward until I put this book down. So throughout the entire series, she's saying like she's saving herself for marriage. She wouldn't date and wouldn't have sex with a vampire because they're basically dead. And she's in this relationship with the werewolf, but she's still drawn to the vampire. And it's kind of very toxic. And in the 6th book, she sees her werewolf boyfriend shapeshift for the first time, and it kind of freaks her out. And when werewolves shapeshift, they want to eat people, and so she's like really weirded out by that, even though vampires, they drink blood as well. So I don't know why she thought that was better than this, but whatever. So in the last book, she sees that, she's freaked out, she goes to the vampire, and then they proceed to have sex, even though for 6 whole books, she's saying she's saving herself for marriage. She loves this werewolf guy. And the way that she kind of rationalizes it in her mind, it just does not make sense to me. And I'm like, So there's like 27 books in this series. And even though I'm really interested to see where it goes, and the later books in the series might be better just because they're, I don't know, with the times. But after that book, it just kind of left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I don't know if I want to continue. So if you've read Anita Blake and like the whole series and think I should continue, just let me know in the comments, because otherwise I think I'm just gonna cut my losses here and stop at book number 6. Next books I read are books 4, 5, and 6 of the Ice Home series by Ruby Dixon. This is a spin-off series of the Ice Planet Barbarians. I've talked about Ice Planet Barbarians numerous times on my channel. I love Ruby Dixon's writing. It's a sci-fi romance series. They are so, so good. They are available on Hoopla if you have the digital library and you do want to get started with this series. Book 4 is Gail's Family. Book 5 is Angie's Gladiator. And book number 6 is Hannah's Hero. Since I've talked about this series a number of times on my channel, I'm not going to go really deep into these books, especially because they are a part of the spin-off series, so really heavy on spoilers. But I gave these books 4 and 5 stars, so they're so good. So just trust me, pick them up. You'll love them. Next one I read is a graphic novel, Harrow County, Volume 2, Twice Told. This was recommended to me by Jess over at Game of Tomes, and it is a horror graphic novel, which the people of this town think this girl is a reincarnated witch, and the artwork in it is amazing. If I'm able to find some, because I don't have the physical copies, but if I'm able to, I'll put some pictures of the artwork. I read the first one last year and I just loved it, so I just moved on to number 2. That one didn't just suck me in like the first one did. The concept of the first one is just so good. The second one is obviously just a continuation of the story. I gave the first one 4 stars and I gave the second one 3.5. Next one I read was Umbrella Academy, Hotel Oblivion. That's volume 3. I read the first 2 last year, so I just finished off this series. I wasn't really impressed with this series as a whole. There is a Netflix series that people tell me that the Netflix series is so much better, so I am interested in that and want to watch that. And I gave Hotel Oblivion 2.5. I just felt like there's a main storyline and then there's also like a bunch of other things going on, and there was just too much, especially for the final book in a series, and it didn't really wrap up very well. Next books I read were books 2 and 3 of the Royally series. So book number 2 was Royally Matched, and book number 3 was Royally Endowed. I read the first book last year. There's still more in the series, I just haven't continued on yet. Since these are books 2 and 3, I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but it's basically about this royal family of Westco. They meet their love interest in their coffee shop and bakery, and the queen wants the prince to find a suitable match so he can continue on the line, obviously, but his love interest is not quote unquote a suitable match since she's not royal. This was just a really fun series, really steamy, really sweet. I think I gave all of these books like 4 stars. Next books I read was books 5 and 6 of the Hannah Swenson mystery series, Fudge Cupcake Murder and Sugar Cookie Murder. So we follow Hannah Swenson and she owns a cookie shop. I really, really loved the first few of this series. Kind of went downhill with books 5 and 6, so I only gave them 3 stars. There's a certain character that I absolutely love in this series, and they were kind of treating him like he was the bad guy. And I think it's because, again, spoilers here, so I'm just holding up the book. So Hannah Swenson is in a non-exclusive relationship with both Mike, who is a detective, and Norman, who is a dentist, I believe. So she's dating both of these men, and she's kind of gravitating towards Norman, even though I personally love Mike. I ship Hannah and Mike like all the way. And in these 2 books, Mike is kind of made out to be not necessarily the bad guy, like he's responsible for the murders that are happening, but they're showing Mike is hanging out with another police officer who he knew from his past, and it shows Hannah as being jealous, which I don't really understand that because Hannah is also dating Norman, like, so you want your cake and eat it too kind of thing. Like, you want Mike and Norman, but then Mike can't see other people, even though he's not seeing other people. He's just her friend, and kind of she's new in town and she is you know, he's kind of showing her the ropes since they've had a friendship in the past. I think what the author is trying to do here is kind of make it easy for Hannah to make a decision to dump Mike and just go with Norman. And I don't really like how she's doing that, because how are you going to be jealous of him hanging out with some other girl when you're doing the exact same thing? I don't think so, Hannah. So I gave both of these books 3 stars. Next series I'm going to talk about is books 2 and 3 of the Conqueror's Saga, Now I Rise and Bright We Burn. I read And I Darken last year and I really enjoyed it, which was surprising because I read Slayer by Kristen White last year as well, and I did not enjoy that at all. So I was kind of apprehensive to start a new series by Kristen White, but this series blew me away. It's a Vlad the Impaler retelling. It's also gender bent as well, so they're talking about Vlad's daughter. So read this book last year, so I just finished the series. I really love Lotta. She knows what she wants and she goes after it, and she kind of stumbles on her way. You know, she gets pulled into a romantic relationship who is technically the prince of a warring kingdom. Even though she wants to be the prince of her own country, he keeps drawing her back, and she finally just says, like, no, I'm gonna be me, I'm gonna be the prince, you can't stop me, kind of thing. And I just love that. So she knows what she wants, she goes after it. Some people might not agree with the way that she does that, because she is very like, you are with me or you're against me, and if you're against me, I'm basically gonna kill you. And we also get points of view from her brother Radu, which I didn't really like him in the first book, but he really grew on me in books 2 and 3. Book 3, it just wrapped up so nicely. It's so bittersweet, the ending. I just love this series so much. I gave Now I Rise 4 stars, and I gave Bright We Burn 4 stars. Next book I read was book number 2 of the Beautiful Bastard series by Christina Lauren, and that is Beautiful Stranger. This is a contemporary romance series, and it is so good. The steam factor in this series is way up, so fan self, let me tell you. But I really enjoyed it. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next series I read is books 3 and 4 of the Slow Burn series by Maya Banks. Book number 3 is Safe at Last, and book number 4 is With Every Breath. This series really goes up and down. I loved books 1 and 2. Book 3, Safe at Last, was a miss for me. I gave it 2.5 stars. There was a lot of things that was just very cringy in this book. Trigger warning for rape, violence against women, and torture in this book. This is kind of a darker romance book, and it has some fantasy aspects as well with the women having supernatural abilities. I just didn't like how the male protagonist in this book handled certain situations, especially when dealing with an abused woman. That kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. But book number 4, With Every Breath, I absolutely loved. I gave it 4 stars. So it's like, this series is just so up and down. I'm kind of hesitant to continue on because I don't want to, you know, read another like terrible book like this one, but I don't want to miss out on great books like book number 4, With Every Breath. So if you've read this series and think I should continue, definitely let me know in the comments. Next book I read was Frost and Flame, which is book number 2 in the Gods of War series by Gina Showalter. I read this for my In Real Life book club. I really enjoy this series. I want to say it's a paranormal romance, but it also has sci-fi aspects, meaning like there are aliens from other worlds and paranormal creatures that are involved in this all war, which is kind of like a Hunger Games. These men and women are put in this battle, and the winner of the all war wins the territory that they're fighting on for their home planet, which in this current all war is Earth. I really love this book. I really love Gina Showalter in general. She's a great author for paranormal romance, and I give this 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. This takes place in New Orleans in 1872. It has some paranormal aspects in there. It has to do with vampires. I love Renee Ahdieh. I love her writing style. I love how descriptive and original she is with her world building. I really loved the Wrath and the Dawn series, and I loved this book. This is kind of slower paced, and she kind of throws, you know, mystery and action snippets in there here and there to kind of break up the monotony. I wasn't bored at all. It just really sucks you in and you want to know what's going on. I buddy read this with Lex, and I know she really enjoyed it too. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next 2 books I read were 15 Inches and Baby It's Cold by Madison Faye. Now I love Madison Faye. She kind of writes like risque erotic romances, and for 15 Inches, that's exactly what you think it is, so I'm not gonna dive into that one too much. And Baby It's Cold, she kind of takes a little twist on the song Baby It's Cold Outside, so you get the kind of weirded out vibes that you do when you're listening to that song, especially in Baby It's Cold, she kind of pushes that envelope with consent. Not the best Madison Faye books I ever read. I gave 15 Inches 3 stars, and I gave Baby It's Cold 2.5. Next book I read was book number 2 of the Spindle Cove series, A Week to Be Wicked by Tessa Dare. I just love this series so much. So Spindle Cove is a place where women can escape the confines of the aristocratic society and the restrictions that they place on women, and they are kind of free to be themselves. And I just love Tessa Dare's writing. She writes a really sassy, witty female protagonist, and honestly, I just laugh out loud with these books. I gave A Week to Be Wicked 4.5 stars. The next series that I read is The Bear Valley Shifters by T.S. Joyce. I read books 1 through 5.5. Book number 1 is The Witness and the Bear. Book number 2 is Devoted to the Bear. Book number 3 is Return to the Bear. Book number 4 is Betray the Bear. Book number 5 is Redeem the Bear. And book number 5.5, which is a novella, is Bear Valley Valentine. So this is a paranormal romance about bear shifters, and I really enjoyed this series. I gave all of these books 4 out of 5 stars. I would have liked a little bit more world building about the bear's history. So without giving too much away, The Witness and the Bear revolves around Hannah Michaels, who is on the run and in witness protection because she witnesses a murder from a mafia-style family. These people are ruthless. They are after her and want to kill her. And so the agents that are responsible for her, one of them dies and the other one is just at his wit's end. He doesn't know how to keep her safe. So he takes her to Bear Valley, which he used to be a part of. He goes to the Alpha saying, I need you to protect her. I don't know how anymore. Like, he's kind of out of his depths. And the Alpha name is Benson Riker. At first he says, no, it's a dangerous time in the pack right now. They're doing like the Alpha challenges. So it's really not safe for a human to be there, especially a human that doesn't know about bear shifters. So he kind of goes tail between his legs. They're driving off. It's on this mountain, so they're driving down and he kind of takes a big risk. He just leaves Hannah there in the wilderness, hoping that she can make her way back to Bear Valley, the main housing where they're at, and she does. And of course, Benson Riker, she just calls him Riker, does take her in. It's a romance, so you know that they end up falling in love. There's a little bit of drama in there because as Alpha, he has to find a mate, and he's really drawn to Hannah, and he's thinking that he can't be with her because she's human, and human bear relationships typically don't do very well as in continuing the Alpha line. If you're looking for a paranormal shifter romance, honestly, give these a try. These are so good. I gave all of these books 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is a reread. I read this when it first came out, and I read this because I'm a part of a traveling annotated book club, and the book club consists of me, my co-hostess with the co-hostess Jen, April, who is a co-worker of mine. She is also on Twitter, Kelsey from Hardback Haven, Jessica and Christina over at Game of Tomes, and their friend Erin, and we each have picked a book and we are sending them around to each other to read and actually annotate in the book. And then when the person who sent their book out gets their book, they will have everybody's thoughts and opinions in their book. And I just thought that was just the neatest idea. So this was Jen's pick. I was really glad that I reread it because with Starless Sea, you know, that came out, I just love Erin Morgenstern's writing. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read is The Plot is Murder. I read this for the Cozy Mystery Book Club, and I will link the live stream discussion that we had about this book in the description box below. Really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read in January was Sea Witch Rising by Sarah Henning. I really loved the first book. I just thought it was a really interesting retelling for Ursula the Sea Witch. This book I just thought was kind of unnecessary. The first book ends, you know, it really, you know, just wraps up really nicely, so I didn't really think this book was necessary. Doesn't really add all that much to the story. I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. And the last book that I read in January was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This book is kind of like a funny mystery book that is not really one of my favorites from Jane Austen, but there's a Jane Austen read-along going on, and I will link all of that information in the description. And Northanger Abbey was the book for January, and I will also link the discussion video that they had for Northanger Abbey in the description box below. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. Moving on to my February reads, the first series that I'm going to be talking about is The Stalking Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. I read books 2, 3, and 4. Book number 2 is Hunting Prince Dracula. Book number 3 is Escaping from Houdini. And book number 4 is Capturing the Devil. I didn't reread Stalking Jack the Ripper. I kind of wanted to, but book number 2 was really good about kind of rehashing things that went down in Stalking Jack the Ripper. So I felt like I remembered it quite well because I did read that about 2017, I think. 3 years ago. This is a YA historical series following Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell. Audrey Rose is really into like forensics, human anatomy, and she works with her uncle. So in each book, there is a new murder mystery, and you follow Thomas and Audrey Rose as they try to figure out the whodunit. And there's also the underlying romance plot between her and Thomas that I just love. I love Thomas Cresswell so much. He's so swoon-worthy. Really, really love this series. I ended up giving Hunting Prince Dracula 4 stars, Escaping from Houdini 3 to 3.5, and Capturing the Devil 4 stars. Next book I read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I'm not going to go into this book very much just because I did do a full discussion video, which I will link in the description box for you. But I love this book, 4 to 5 stars. Next book I read was Cream Pie by Madison Faye. Again, Madison Faye writes erotic contemporary romance, and I just love her, but she does push the envelope and does like these taboo, risque tropes. In this particular book, the male protagonist is significantly older than the female protagonist, but she is still over 18. But I really enjoy Madison Faye's writing. I gave that book 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. A buddy read this with a friend of mine. She's not really on Twitter. I really, really enjoyed this book. It follows Elizabeth, and she was raised as a foundling in Ostermere's Great Library. The libraries in this book is kind of like the restricted section in Hogwarts. They shelve magical grimoires, well, if they are quote unquote provoked or you do something to them that they don't like, they turn into these monsters, and Elizabeth is being trained to guard these books and keep them safe from people and keep people safe when they turn into these monsters. The concept was just super interesting to me. There's also sorcerers in this book. His name is Nathaniel Thorne. I just love Nathaniel so much. He is so sassy and sarcastic, and there were several times in this book where his lines are just laugh out loud funny. And it is kind of a hate to love trope because Elizabeth doesn't really trust the sorcerers, but she has no one else to turn to except for Nathaniel, and he does, agree to help her, and they do develop a romance, and it's very, very sweet. This book is just so whimsical and addicting. Like, I didn't want to put it down. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Immortal Born. This is the latest book in the Ingenue series by Lindsay Sands. This revolves around a vampire family whose vampirism comes from nanites that are injected into their bloodstream, and they are descendants from a Atlantean race who was technologically advanced to make these nanites. So like I said, this is the latest book in this series. I'm not sure when the next book comes out, but it is later this year. So I am all caught up with this series, which is really great. This is book number 30 in that series. So it is a particularly long series. Some of these books are hit and miss. Some books I give 3 stars, some books I give 4 stars, but this book I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Next series I'm going to talk about is books number 3 and 4 of the Spindle Cove series. I read book number 2 back in January. So book 3 is Lady by Midnight, and book number 4 is Any Duchess Will Do. I love this series. I gave this book 4 stars. I gave Any Duchess Will Do 5 stars. Love, love, love this series. Tessa Dare is an amazing author. Next series I'm going to talk about is the In Death series by J.D. Robb. I read books 1 through 4. Naked in Death, Glory in Death, Immortal in Death, and Rapture in Death. Now, J.D. Robb is a pen name of Nora Roberts. I love Nora Roberts. She writes really great romance novels. This is a romantic suspense series. This has been on my radar for a while, and I am so mad at myself that I slept on this series for so long. Like why didn't I read this series sooner? I believe book number 50 comes out this year, so I have a lot more books to get to. But we follow Eve Dallas. She is a detective in this futuristic society. The year is 2058 or 53. I'm not sure. But it's futuristic. I wasn't expecting that aspect either. I had no idea it was futuristic. So when I was reading it, it kind of caught me by surprise, but it was a great surprise. It just added that extra element that just kicked it up a notch for me. Each book we follow Eve as she tries to figure out a murder mystery, and there's also an underlying romance plot as well. Each book ends in a happily ever after or happily for now, which is really nice. And her significant other, his name is Rourke. He's kind of like this Irish billionaire who is just so swoony. So really enjoyed this series. I will say that there is a trigger warning for rape and child abuse in this series as well. They are mentioned in each book. It really gets heavy in this last book because Eve is really coming to terms with her trauma and she's remembering more and more. Like, it was so significantly traumatic that she like suppressed it and she just, you know, doesn't think about it, but she's having more nightmares as she's remembering it and talking to a psychiatrist. In the healing steps, it really dives deep into the rape in these later books here. So just trigger warning for that. But other than that, these books are really good. I think I gave all of them 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Death by Darjeeling. This is book number 1 in the Tea Shop Mystery series by Laura Childs. I did not enjoy this book very well. I think I ended up giving it like 2 stars. I'm not going to go very deep into this book because I did film a review with Jen. It just hasn't been posted yet, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Next book I read is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This is book number 1 in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. This book was a reread for me, but I'm really glad that I reread it because I am continuing on with the series. I want to read the entire Grishaverse in anticipation for the Netflix show that is coming out. Also not going to go very deep into this book because, again, Jen and I did film a review video for this. It has not been posted, but it will be, and we are going to continue on with the series, so there will be more review videos for books 2 and 3 and also Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Really enjoyed this book. Gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Circe by Madeline Miller. This is like a mythology retelling involving Circe, who is the witch that Odysseus meets on the island when he's heading back to Ithaca after the Battle of Troy. And so you just dive more deeply into her story and her traumas. And honestly, I just felt for Circe. Everything that can go wrong will to this poor girl. I just love Madeline Miller's, the way she writes. It's pure poetry. It's just beautiful. I buddy read this with Lex and Nancy, and I honestly, Circe deserves whatever happiness she can find. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Dangerously Mine by A.M. Griffin. This is a sci-fi romance novel. It follows Ava after aliens have invaded and conquered Earth. They take her to sell her as a slave on a very distant planet. On this planet, she meets Teo, who is a king from a different planet, and he is actually disgusted about the act of slavery, but when he sees her, he knows she is his mate and cannot leave this planet without her, so he does end up buying her, and that kind of starts the relationship off very rocky, but Eva kind of knows like this is her chance to get off this planet, and she takes it. Reading this book, I felt like I was kind of missing something, like there might have been another book in this series, but it says that it was book number 1, so I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was The 100,000 Kingdoms. This is book number 1 in the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This was recommended by B over at Bewitched Shelves. They did an amazing book review video on this, so I'm going to link that in the description box below because they do a really good job, better than I ever could, of describing this book. But trust us when we say this romantic fantasy is amazing. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Just the world building and the fantasy building, the mythology of this book, the magic system is just so incredible and original. I loved it. Thank you, B, for this recommendation. I am going to be continuing on with the series. Next book I read was Elementary She Read by Vicky Delaney. This is book number 1 in the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop Mystery series. I read this for the Cozy Mystery Book Club, and I will link the live stream discussion video we had in the description box below for you. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I loved this book so much. I read it for my In Real Life book club. If you love The Night Circus, you will absolutely love this book. We follow a lot of different points of view, different timelines. Erin Morgenstern, she doesn't write her stories linear, like beginning end. She does jump around, so it does get kind of confusing in that aspect. But my one piece of advice to you in reading this book is don't try to understand everything in the beginning. Don't do it. Just read it, enjoy it. I promise you everything will make sense in the end. The main plot is we follow Zachary when he's a little boy. He does see a door painted on a wall. At that time, he does not open it. He grows up, he's in college, he's in the library, and he finds a book. And while he's reading this book, there are certain parts that are about him, and he is very intrigued. He reads about the time where he finds that door and did not open it, and he realizes what a mistake that was. And he goes on this adventure to try to figure out what the door means and where it leads. And it's just absolutely amazing and beautifully written. And it's just, this book is for book lovers. Could you just imagine going into a library and picking up a book and reading it and it's about you? It's just so amazing. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The last series that I'm going to be talking about is After by Anna Todd. I did read book number 1. I'm planning on finishing book number 2 today. In book number 1, we follow Tessa and Hardin and their very toxic, tumultuous relationship. Honestly, it's one of those books where it's like a really bad car accident and you just cannot look away. At this point, I just hate reading this series because the way the first book ends, and the author did this on purpose because, you know, if it wrapped up, I could have been like, okay, I don't have to read the rest of the series. But the way that the first book ends, you just have to know what is going on with these 2 toxic people and their struggles. I could not force myself to give the first book a full 3 stars, so I ended up giving it 2.5. But I am continuing on with the series, as you know, because I just started After We Collide. It's kind of like a very poorly written 10 Things I Hate About You. It's also a One Direction fan fiction, which I found that out from Nancy, who I'm buddy reading this with, Nancy and Lex. And that's like, it's bad, but it's so crazy addictive. That's really the only way that I can describe it. God help me, but I do want to watch the movie. That is all the books that I've read in January and February. Thank you so much for sticking with me. If you did through the end, if you jumped around a lot, thank you for watching just in general. I know like my videos are extra long and I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, if you read any of these books and you want to talk to me more about them, please comment. And don't forget to like my video if you did, and subscribe if you're new. And you can follow me on all the social media platforms. The links will be in the description box below. We'll see you next time, avid readers.